Most men throw compliments like confetti, hoping one sticks. You're so pretty. Wow, you're different. You have such a good vibe. And then they wonder why she ghosts, why she doesn't chase, why she treats them like background noise. Here's the brutal truth. It's not what you say. It's who you are when you say it. Women don't crave another rehearsed line. They're watching your energy, your presence, and most men, they come off needy, hesitant, trying too hard to impress. That's why this matters, because there are things you can say, simple, powerful words that hit differently, not because they're magic, because they come from a man who knows who the hell he is, a man who doesn't chase validation, a man who speaks from stillness, not desperation. If you're ready to speak in a way that moves her, not just entertains her, then listen close. This changes everything. Most men approach women like starving men at a buffet, grabbing at everything, desperate to be fed. Their compliments reek of neediness. Their attention feels like a transaction. You're beautiful isn't a statement of fact. When it comes from trembling lips, it's a plea for validation. But when you say, I don't need you, but I choose you, you're speaking from a different place entirely. You're the man standing at the ocean's edge, completely at home, whether she flows into your life or recedes back to sea. That's the power position. Not because you're playing games, because you've done the real work of becoming someone who stands on his own 2 feet. Women can smell neediness like blood in the water, and it repels them at a cellular level. Not because they're cruel, but because they're wired to seek strength. The kind of man who would be just fine without her, but actively wants her in his life. That distinction changes everything. When you truly don't need her, your choice becomes valuable rather than expected. Your attention becomes a gift rather than an obligation. She'll start qualifying herself to you instead of the other way around. But here's the critical part. This isn't something you can fake. You have to actually build a life so full and a character so strong that your words ring with truth. The women who matter will feel the difference in their bones when you say it. They'll lean in rather than pull away, not because you've tricked them, but because you've shown them what real masculine security looks like. And that's catnip to the right kind of woman, the kind worth choosing. Most conversations between men and women are surface-level transactions, hollow compliments, rehearsed stories, the same tired dance of pretending to be interesting. When you look her in the eye with calm intensity and say, tell me something you've never told anyone, you're not just making conversation, you're handing her the key to a vault she's been guarding her whole life. Women walk through the world wearing masks, the good girl, the tough girl, the girl who's got it all together, because they've learned that showing their real selves comes with consequences. But you're creating a space where she can finally take off the armor. The magic isn't in the question itself, but in how you hold the silence afterward, without judgment, without rushing to fill the space with your own stories. Most men can't handle a woman's truth. They flinch at her darkness, try to fix her pain, or worse, use her vulnerability against her later. But when you remain steady as she shares something real, when you listen not to respond but to understand, you become the rarest of things, a safe harbor in a world full of men who only want the polished version of her. That's when you'll see her shoulders drop, her breathing slow, her eyes lock onto yours in a way that says, oh, you're different. Because in that moment, you're not just another guy trying to get laid. You're the man who might actually deserve to know her. Every woman has endured men who treated her like a problem to be solved, who pathologized her emotions, who saw her fire as something to extinguish rather than admire. When you say, I'm not here to fix you, you're rejecting that entire paradigm. You're telling her you don't view her as a project, but as a complete human being, storms and all. Most men approach women's struggles with solutions, with platitudes, with that arrogant male instinct to make it better. But real strength isn't about fixing, it's about witnessing. It's about the courage to stand beside someone in their mess without needing to tidy it up. When she's raging, when she's broken, when she's at her most unlovable, That's when your presence matters most. Not because you have answers, but because you're proving you can handle her reality without flinching. This is where most men fail. They love the idea of a woman until she shows them the parts that aren't pretty. But you're communicating something radical. She doesn't need to perform perfection to be worthy of love. That her darkness doesn't scare you. That you're not just passing through for the good times. And when a woman realizes you mean this, really means it, that's when the walls come down, not because you've charmed her, because you've shown her what actual security looks like. You become the oak tree in her hurricane, not trying to stop the storm, but proving you won't be uprooted by it. And in a world full of fair weather lovers, that kind of steadfastness is irresistible. Women spend their lives performing, smiling when they're not happy, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, shrinking their personalities to fit whatever box the man in front of them seems to want. When you say, "You don't have to impress me," you're handing her a get-out-of-jail-free card from that exhausting performance. Most men don't realize they're auditioning women, testing them against some invisible checklist of what they think they should want. But you're cutting through the bullshit and speaking to the exhausted woman underneath the makeup and the small talk. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's about raising them to what actually matters. Any man can be impressed by surface-level perfection. It takes a real man to appreciate the messy, complicated human beneath the facade. When she realizes you mean this, that you're not just waiting for her to slip up so you can withdraw your approval, that's when you'll see her transform before your eyes. The guarded posture relaxes. The nervous laughter stops. The real her starts to emerge. Because here's the secret: women rarely admit they're tired of performing too. They want to be loved for their rough edges and weird quirks, not despite them. But most men never give them that chance. They keep demanding the highlight reel. When you become the exception, the man who actually prefers reality over the performance, that's when she'll start looking at you differently. Not because you've played some game, because you've given her something rare: permission to finally stop pretending. Strong women have spent a lifetime being told they're too much, too intense, too independent, too passionate. They've watched lesser men shrink from their fire, intimidated by a presence they can't control. When you look her dead in the eye and say, "You don't scare me," you're not just flattering her, you're speaking directly to every insecurity society has conditioned into her. Most men either try to dominate strong women or become submissive to them, but you're doing something radically different, standing as an equal. You're showing her that her strength doesn't threaten you, because you're not measuring yourself against it. That's the paradox. The more unshakable you remain in the face of her intensity, the more she can finally relax into her femininity. Because here's the truth most men miss. Even the most formidable women secretly long to meet their match. Not someone who will break them, but someone who won't be broken by them. When you say these words with quiet confidence, when your body language matches your tone, you're giving her permission to stop being the strong one for once. You'll see her shoulders drop, her guard lower, her eyes soften in a way she probably can't fake. Not because you've conquered her, because you've proven yourself worthy of her respect. And in that moment, all the games, all the tests, all the walls come crashing down. Because you've shown her what she's been waiting her whole life to find. A man who isn't intimidated by her power, but who's strong enough to stand beside it. Most men spend their lives chasing validation, performing for affection, and shrinking themselves to fit into someone else's expectations. And it shows. But you're different. You've just learned the unshakable truths that separate the boys from the real men: how to speak with power, not desperation, how to create depth, not just attraction, how to stand firm in your worth so she doesn't just want you, she craves you. This isn't about manipulation. It's about mastery. Mastery of yourself, your energy, and the way you show up in the world. Because when you stop begging for attention and start commanding respect, everything changes. Women don't respond to neediness. They respond to strength. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet, unbreakable kind that says, I don't chase, I choose. So here's your call to action. Stop rehearsing lines and start building a man worth following. Stop seeking approval and start radiating the kind of presence that pulls her in without you lifting a finger. The world is full of boys pretending to be men. Don't be one of them. Be the exception. The man who knows his worth. The man who speaks with conviction, listens with depth, and stands with unshakable confidence. If this hit you, if you're ready to stop playing games and start winning the real way, then it's time to act. Subscribe now. Step up, transform, because the right woman isn't looking for another follower. She's waiting for a leader. And that leader, it's time for him to be you.